Built in 1744 as a Roman Catholic mission, the Alamo was the site of a famous last stand in 1836 during the Texas Revolution, where a group of Texan defenders were encircled, besieged, and ultimately killed by the Mexican army of General Antonio López de Santa Anna. The defenders of the Alamo, including iconic historical figures such as James Bowie, Colonel William Travis, and Davy Crockett, have since grown to mythic status in Texas history. But the historical site is also well known in rock and roll circles for a slightly less noble reason. It was here that a heavily inebriated Ozzy Osbourne on February 19, 1982 managed to deeply insult the entire population of the great state of Texas. Often legendary tales morph over time as a story is told and retold, eventually ending up almost unrecognizable from the actual events that took place. Let's examine what actually happened on that fateful day in February of 1982. On Wednesday, February 17, Ozzy Osbourne performed at the Sam Houston Coliseum in Houston, Texas. On Thursday, February 18, the band party traveled the approximately 200 miles to San Antonio, where they were booked to perform at the San Antonio Convention Center Arena on February 19. In the early afternoon of Friday, February 19, an already, or perhaps still drunk Ozzy decided that he would leave the hotel and do some sightseeing with a couple of photographers in tow. This was easier said than done, as wife and manager Sharon did her best to keep his drunken behavior under control by hiding all of his clothes, so he really couldn't go anywhere. In theory, this should have worked and kept him in the hotel, but instead Ozzy just decided to put on a bunch of Sharon's clothes instead of his own. Now, this is one of the details of this story that has been distorted over the years. It has always been reported that Ozzy put on a green evening dress for his venture outside the hotel. But in recent years photos have surfaced that shows he was actually wearing black pants, a two-tone blouse and a beige lady's hat. Oh, and also Sharon's handbag, for good measure. This brings us to the second major inconsistency in the story as it has been told for decades: the Alamo itself. The Alamo site basically consists of three different parts: the actual Fort Alamo, the plaza and the cenotaph. Legend has it that Ozzy relieved himself on the actual Fort Alamo, but in reality he did it against the cenotaph column, which is located across the street from the fort. The cenotaph was built in 1939 by the Texas Centennial Commission to honor the dead whose remains lay somewhere else. And so this was the site where an intoxicated Ozzy decided it would be a good place to empty his bladder. He probably had no idea he was standing at the city's sacred 60-foot-high cenotaph, located directly across from the Alamo building. Hell, he was barely in any condition to remember what city he was in, let alone where he was relieving himself. It wasn't long before someone exclaimed, "That wall you're relieving on is the Alamo." "The Ala what?" Ozzy reportedly asked. And then he found himself face down on the ground and in handcuffs. Billy Holbert was reportedly the name of the police officer who arrested Ozzy on February 19, 1982 at 3 p.m. He was charged with public intoxication and held at the Bexar County Adult Detention Center for about an hour until he was bailed out by Sharon for the princely sum of $40. After Sharon posted the $40 bail, Ozzy was able to perform the scheduled concert at the Hemis Fair Arena in San Antonio. But this is only where the real trouble began. Ozzy's concert that night at the old Hemis Fair Arena broke out into a near riot. 24 people were arrested and 11 full-sized windows at the venue were smashed. After the show, Ozzy joked with a reporter that he had achieved a lifetime goal. "I urinated on the Alamo, and the White House is next," he told the San Antonio Light. OZZY's continued antics struck a nerve at City Hall in San Antonio. Elected officials unanimously agreed to completely ban him from city-owned facilities. OZZY skipped town before the trial and chose to never return. The warrant for his arrest stood for several years, and the ban in San Antonio would stand for 10 years. 10 years later, in 1992, OZZY finally made a public apology to the city of San Antonio and donated $10,000 to the Daughters of the Republic of Texas, the organization that maintains the Alamo grounds. The heartfelt apology was accepted by the council, the 10-year ban lifted, and finally, in October of 1992, Ozzy Osbourne would perform in San Antonio again. "We all have done things in our lives that we regret," Ozzy said at the time. "I am deeply honored that the people of San Antonio have found it in their hearts to have me back. I hope that this donation will show that I have grown up." However, none of this stopped Ozzy from receiving a fair number of death threats. Indeed, many San Antonio officials were surprised that he left the city alive. Things got so intense at one point that he had fans frisked on entry to his Texas concerts. Thankfully, everything soon settled down, and Ozzy continues to wreak havoc there to this day. In 2015, things between Ozzy and the Alamo would come full circle. On November 5, 2015, Ozzy returned to San Antonio with his son Jack to film a segment for an episode for a series on the History Channel. It was supposed to be an unpublicized event, but someone leaked the news that the Prince of Darkness was coming to their town, and more than 100 people gathered at the grounds for Ozzy's arrival, and once again he brought pandemonium to the Alamo.
Jack!
Everybody just to take a step backward. Everybody take a step backward. Ozzy for president! Take another couple steps back. Everybody take a couple steps back. Back up.
Mark at the Middle was the best album ever!
Go take another 2.